Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria, your host today, with an amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. And you have it today with our guest, Bruno Roque Cignacco. Bruno is the author of The Art of Compassionate Business, Main Principles for the Human-Oriented Enterprise. It's one of his books, and it is the one we're talking about today. Dr. Bruno Roque Cignacco, PhD, is an international business consultant, international speaker, TEDx speaker as well, and a business coach. For over 20 years, he has advised and trained hundreds of companies on international trade activities and international marketing. Dr. Cignacco is a university lecturer, a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy in the UK. He is also the author of business and personal development books published in different languages. His new book, The Art of Compassionate Business, and you can see the link on my website, The Art of Compassionate Business, Main Principles for the Human-Oriented Enterprise. Welcome to the show, Dr. Cignacco.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invite. Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful that you're here because you are talking about things that are very important to me. If they're important to me, they're going to be important to the listeners. Dr. Cignacco is going to talk about compassion in the business environment, kindness, gratitude, generosity, relationships, all sorts of things that we need to be practicing now. So how did you get on this path to write this book, Bruno?
This is a very interesting question. I wanted to comment about this. 3 years ago, I read an article, more than 3 years ago, I read an article in Harvard Business Review that was titled The Human Moment at Work. In this article, there were cases of companies that were using technology, and by using this technology like email, voice mails, they were not connecting to each other. The employees were not connecting to each other on a human level. They were not connecting to each other, developing trust and cooperation bonds. And I was very intrigued about this, and I wanted to know more, and I started the process of research that was coordinated by my new book, The Art of Compassionate Business, nearly 3 years process of research, and I found that there are many companies that are not acting in a compassionate way. And this is quite important because many of the companies in the marketplace are acting in the opposite way, in a non-compassionate way. You might have seen companies that are firing employees without any mercy, or companies that are deceiving customers, companies that are being not environmentally friendly, or companies that are developing agreement with some partners that are win-lose agreement. These are examples of companies that are not acting in a compassionate way. And I also look for example of companies that are acting in a compassionate way. These are companies that develop robust relationship with different stakeholders, for example, customers, suppliers, employee, community members. And this company understand that the building brick of any business activity is the human being. So if we do not care for the human being, you won't achieve as a business any positive outcome, like a profitability, productivity, efficiency, market share. Why? Because these outcomes are always tied to relationship that should be robust, that should be related to win-win agreement with different stakeholders. So this is my main motivation to write this book. And also there are other reasons that then I will explain during this conversation.
Well, what you're talking about, all of these things, compassion and the generosity and social impact, and my perspective on compassion is not wanting others to suffer. That's the Tibetan perspective. And that's the one I take almost every day, and I work on it as part of my this is who I am. So, it's the way we speak to people, the way we listen to people, and the way we help people find their way in business and in life. And this is what Dr. Cignacco was doing here today. So when did this start with you? What did you do when you were younger, before you reached your path to being a university lecturer and a senior fellow at HEA in UK? What were you doing?
Well, I started working when I finished secondary school. I started studying accountancy, and I worked as an accountant for many years. This was traditional advisory on business aspect, for example, tax advisory, auditing, consultancy regarding financial projects. This was a very traditional type of advisory activities. I felt very fulfilled because at that moment this was a very good beginning. But I didn't think at that moment, we're talking about many decades ago, I didn't think about the link between compassion and business. I only saw that what was important for many companies was the quantitative aspect of business. So, for example, how much profit they made. This was very important for most companies. And also how much market share they had, or, for example, how much the sales grew over the last few years. But they didn't focus. After many years, I discovered that they didn't focus so much on qualitative aspect of business. For example, being caring with employees, or, for example, being supportive with customers, or, for example, building robust relationship with suppliers. Companies were much more focused on what we call the bottom line. This means profit, but they were not focusing on bringing about, at that moment, I realized, a positive effect on the social environment, or positive effect on the environment, the ecosystem, being environmentally friendly. So when I was working as an accountant, was a very limited view of business activities. But over time, this evolved because of other consultancy activity that I developed after acting as an accountant. For example, I started advising companies on international trade activities. And this got me in contact with different cultures, different cultural environment, different views of reality, different ways of perceiving reality according to values, tradition, customs that are related to each cultural environment. This opened my mind quite a lot. And this was also a very fulfilling activity. And in alongside this, in parallel, I also started teaching at university at undergraduate and postgraduate level business modules, but were the traditional business module like a strategy or marketing, or, for example, business project. But I wasn't so keen or interested or enthusiastic about some aspect like a business ethics, or, for example, compassionate entrepreneurship. This was part of my personal and professional evolution.
Well, I think that you stepped from your shadow careers, I call it, when people are satisfied, but it's not totally fulfilling. When you were an accountant, you were fulfilled to a certain extent, but you needed to get out more and reach more people with your messages about compassion in the workplace.
I agree.
And yes, and I think that when companies start small, as most, you can't, it's hard to start big. But when companies start small and then grow, they're friendly and kind, and they have great relationships at the beginning. But as they get too big, they forget that the humane piece about who they are and what they brought to the table to begin with.
It's so important because I agree with this, because companies, when become bigger, they become much more impersonal. Especially companies that have a very important scale, they lose the sight of the ties, the bonds that are the foundation of any business activity. And why I say that they are the foundation of any business activity? Because according to my research, I observed that companies that succeed from the economic perspective, but also from the social and environmental perspective, this means that they have a wider view of business, take into account the interdependence between the company and different stakeholders. This is a very important difference between companies that are compassionate and companies that are non-compassionate. Companies that are compassionate take into consideration this interdependence. They know that this company cannot succeed without customers. They cannot succeed without the community. They cannot succeed without employees. They cannot succeed without business partners. They know that they have to rely on them. And by treating each of these stakeholders, these individuals and groups with interest in our organization, in a compassionate, caring, and supportive way, these stakeholders tend to reciprocate. They tend to act alike. So this means that when you support these stakeholders, when the company is in need, these stakeholders are more willing to support this company. The opposite happens. This is a principle called the principle of reciprocity.
Yes.
When you treat different stakeholders, for example, you try to deceive customer, this customer not only will leave your company and will switch to competitors' products, but also this customer will start talking about your company in a bad way, leaving negative reviews online, telling their friends, please do not go to this company because you know what, they're terrible. They don't treat you well. They don't recognize your rights, your needs. So this is important. Interdependence is the key factor in any business activity. I see so many companies that are so focused on these key performance indicators such as profitability, productivity, efficiency, and they forget that these key performance indicators are always the natural result between the company and its relationship with these stakeholders. So when the company fosters robust relationship with these stakeholders, long-term relationship, mutually profitable relationship with these stakeholders, these key performance indicators are achieved in a natural way. Instead, when the company focuses only on profits, sales, market share, they tend to dismiss by default these relationships that are the core factor of any business activity.
Do you think that there has been a change in people's perspective as well as business owners and employees' perspectives this past year? Do you think they're more or less compassionate?
Well, you have two types of companies. We cannot generalize, but I can see in the marketplace two types of companies in the business environment. One type of company that they didn't acknowledge the profound change that we have is been affected. We all have been affected by this change, the pandemic, and they continue acting in the same way, in a desponding way, in some cases profit-oriented, sales-oriented, not caring so much on about the relationship, only focus on the bottom line. However, I saw some companies that are much more open to change. They understand that this is not only a temporary change, it's a profound change that is resetting many of the assumptions in society and in the business environment. And they understand that, for example, during the pandemic, social distancing does not imply emotional distancing. On the contrary, social distancing, for example, people working from home, remote work, bring about the opportunity to connect on a much deeper level, to develop much deeper trust and cooperation bonds. They understand also that many employees are affected by difficulties, challenges, and in some cases work from home, but also care for the children. And they tend to be more flexible, more supportive. They allow employees to work flexible hours. They allow employees, in some cases, to work some days, another take some rest or have a break. And they allow employees to be much more at ease. They try to provide these employees what we call psychological safety. Even despite all these challenging situations that are affecting the world, the pandemic and the COVID, companies do their best to provide these employees with psychological safety. And by doing so, employees tend to become much more creative, tend to become much more productive, more committed. They tend to go the extra mile. However, you see companies that are acting in the opposite way. Second group of companies that are firing employees mercilessly during the pandemic, not caring for the employees at all, not caring about supporting these employees. These companies, sooner or later, will suffer from this negative attitude toward employees. Why? Because, first off, their image is affected and it's appearing all media and news. This is very public. Some companies have been acting in a very a non-compassionate way, but also when companies want to require support from this stakeholder, it will be very difficult for this company to regain the trust that was lost because of this attitude. So I see two, like a polarized view of business. Some companies are acting in a very compassionate way, and some companies are acting in a more indifferent way towards stakeholders.
I think that the companies that were able to act in a more compassionate way and have more flexible hours for their employees who had to work from home, however they had to work from home, because it was complicated for the employees as well, taking care of children, school age, teaching, and all of that, that gave permission to the employee to be more of who they truly are, to pull down all of the barriers that they have to put up when you're in the office, because there's always this false front that they have to put up so that they can maintain. And now that hard false front has been crushed down, and there's more there's another word I want to use, but there's more truthfulness between the employer and the employee in that particular environment. The employees trust their bosses more, and the employers trust their employees more, which is what they've all been trying to do for decades.
I agree. And also we have to understand that all this pandemic made people, not only ourselves, but business people, including business people, much more vulnerable. And vulnerability in some cases is considered as a weakness in business. But many authors observe, and many researchers observe, that vulnerability could be a very positive trait in business, because you are being authentic, you are being straightforward, you are being frontal. If you have some needs that are not satisfied, you are willing to request some help, to ask for help. And this is what I observe. Companies that are acting in a compassionate way, employees are much more willing to ask for, to make some requests that in the past wouldn't have think at all. And manager bosses are much more willing to support this employee when they see that they are suffering or they're in need or they have difficulties, challenges, because many employees want, beside the good salary, beside the safe environment, they want to be treated as human beings with legitimate needs to be recognized. And they want to be supported, and they want to be acknowledged as contributors to this company. It's not only because many companies focus only on the economic side of the employment relationship, but there are non-economic aspects of the relationship, like a psychological contract, a good relationship between the employer and the employee, that are as important as the economic aspects.
Absolutely. And they don't realize, well, those who have not done that, those who have not created a warming, friendly, compassionate relationship with each other, because it has to go both ways. It has to go from the hierarchy to the employee and back again. It can't just go one way. I hope that it doesn't change to go to a hard boss-employee kind of relationship again, because then they will lose money, then they will lose face, they will lose value. But to me, being vulnerable, I was writing about this a couple of days ago, and I can't remember in what context, but it was one of my newsletters. But being vulnerable is about being, as you said, not only, it's being who you truly are. It's showing
authentic.
Yes. It's definitely authentic. And we have to understand that we're dealing with human beings and not robots, because if they're not careful, robots will take over. So I
agree.
Yeah. What can you tell our audience? How can they express their need if they haven't already done so? How can employees or employers express, how can employers, share their desire to care for and to be vulnerable to and accept the vulnerability of the employees?
Very important question. I want to put this into context. First, we have to understand that when employers become more compassionate, not only they are developing much stronger relationship. According to research, a compassionate work environment brings about higher employee satisfaction, higher customer satisfaction, lower employee turnover, lower employee absenteeism, lower stress levels, And all these indicators impact positively on the bottom line. So, but the question is, how can we become more compassionate as employers regarding our employees? Well, very simple tips, very actionable tips that are be more generous and grateful. And I devoted a few chapters of my book on this. So being more generous doesn't mean paying a higher salary. You can be more generous in an economic way. This means paying a bonus, a higher salary. This will be important, but also you can be generous when you are giving people intangible things. For example, when you're giving support, when you're giving training if they need, when you're giving advice, when you're giving thanks, when you're giving a ear when they have a problem, you are listening to them. So these are as important as the tangible aspect, economic aspect, like a higher salary, bonus, and so on. But also being grateful. I see many companies that are very ungrateful with employees. I give you some example. I don't want to mention the company, but I saw some companies that employees can be working the extra mile. They give their best. They're working overtime for weeks. And when the project is finished, the company doesn't even acknowledge the employee contribution. How can this employee feel? Well, this employee will feel obviously despondent, will feel non-cooperative. They won't be willing to contribute in the future. Why? Because their contribution was not acknowledged, was not appreciated. So appreciation is a very important trait of compassionate businesses. When you're appreciative, for example, an actionable tip is writing a handwritten thank you notes. So you give a thank you note for this employee to be sure that their contribution was acknowledged and valued. Employees wanted to know always and want to know always that their contribution counts, that they count as people, that company value their support. If not, this employee, even is paid a good salary, will look for other work environment where they can be much more appreciated. They want to feel that their contribution is meaningful, that they're contributing to the company's purpose in a meaningful way. They don't want to be treated as a cog in the organizational machinery, replaceable like a piece or a part. They want to feel that they are unique human beings with their unique talents that can be contributing for this company to become better.
Yeah, a simple thank you, thank you is good. A thank you note is wonderful. But some way that the employee is acknowledged with authentic sentiments, just because they're there, they show up. I mean, you can, as I say, you've got the robots on the way, but even if you change them with another human being, it will be a lesser person because they have not experienced the opportunity to work for a humane corporation. So
I agree.
What can you say to our listeners about what they can do, whether they have their own company, whether they think of starting their own company, and how can they hire people and have the sense of community, short of sitting around and having a big lunch at a nice Italian restaurant, which is okay for me. But how can they invite people to the table, so to speak, and be an employee with their company? What can you tell these people? Either side, you can take either position, the employer or the employee.
To foster a much more compassionate workplace, there are a few things that we can do as an employer, but also as an employee. A workplace that is compassionate, this means that people respect one another and people try to work in a cooperative way. All this negative side of politics that are common in any work environment, for example, one-upmanship, or for example, gossiping, or for example, turf wars, they're left aside. Why? Because people understand that they are interdependent with one another. They want to cooperate. They want to work jointly. They support one another when they need the support from others, but also they understand that any company is always bringing about result as part of their collective contribution. Nobody can take all the merit for this company's success. It's like a combination of effort that is very important for company's result. But also, if I am the employer, I will try to highlight for each employee very clearly what is their contribution on a weekly or daily basis to the big company's mission. Because employees get more motivated, according to research, when they feel that their daily activities, their tasks at work, contribute to a bigger purpose. They're not repeating these tasks endlessly, but they're making positive change. They're contributing in a positive way to the business result and to the society as a whole and to the environment as a whole. And also, I will take into account this aspect, quantitative and qualitative aspect of business. We saw that many companies tend to focus so much as employers on this bottom line, on this aspect that can be measured, can be counted. And there is a famous thinker that observed, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So this means that we have to look not only for quantitative aspect of business, profit, market share, sales, and so on, but also you have to look for qualitative aspect of business, what cannot be measured, such as camaraderie, compassion, care, support, empathy. Employers should foster these values, these principles, because they are important. And when you do so, you create a positive work environment. You create a positive atmosphere. There is a lot of research on emotion and the work environment that observe when people act in a positive way with positive emotion in the work environment, these emotions tend to infect others. This means that others tend to feel also the same positive emotion, and this brings about a positive atmosphere in the work environment. The opposite happens when you have negative emotion like anger or sadness, and you tend to infect this work environment with this emotion, and this tend to bring about an environment that is much more based on fear or anger, and this is not very productive. So I would say always try to bring about your best at work as an employee. Try to support others if you are the employee working for this company. Try to look how to go the extra mile, but also enhance, try to contribute to enhancing other people's skills. It's a teamwork. Any business activity is teamwork. No company can succeed on its own. And try to understand that only company can succeed when the needs of all stakeholders, including employees, are satisfied. Try to get away from this win-lose agreement that are very common in business, where when a company wins at the expense of others.
Well, everybody counts or nobody counts. And
everyone counts.
Everyone counts. So it's not complicated for people to figure out a plan, a proposal, an action, whatever it might be, where everybody counts and everybody enjoys. So, Bruno, how can people find you?
Okay, thank you very much. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find my account on LinkedIn, and also they can check my website. It's www.brunocignacco.com, and the other website is www.humanorientedenterprise.com. These are my two websites.
Okay, so Bruno Cignacco, BrunoCignacco.com. And if you're listening while you're on my website, audience, you can see everything there, right there in front of you, all in print. I want to thank Bruno for being here today. It's been an important and highly contributing time, and he makes a great deal of sense. That's his book is The Art of Compassionate Business, Main Principles for the Human-Oriented Enterprise. For those of you who are looking for my free ebook on my website, go to askjoannevictoria.com/podcast, and you can get your True Self Handbook, the guide to transform your life. I hope everybody has a great day, no matter what's going on, and be blessed. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to askjoannevictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's askjoannevictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.